All right, we're going to talk about your food plot. When it comes down to food plot, it's going to determine how big of a food plot you need for how many people you're going to be feeding. You see what's up there on the board. That's about a quarter of that field. That field runs about 225 feet long. Now when I used to be, up to a year ago, this is the first year in many, many years, I've not been a commercial farmer. We were certified naturally grown, which is a branch from certified organic. And so we were running a lot of produce to a lot of people. We had direct sales on our farm, and we had a 150 member CSA program, which was supplying food for about, and it really wasn't all their food, but they would get a box every week of food off the farm at about $30 a box for 24 weeks. Now you can go ding, 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 ding and figure that one out. But we were running food off the farm for 24 weeks for the public. We were growing food on this farm year-round for ourselves. I didn't get started that way. I started with a smaller garden, and I fell in love with growing food, as you can kind of see. And it became my third love actually. The Lord became my first love, my wife my second love, and the land was the third love. And as I began to fall deeper in love with the land and working the land, and I'll just tell you, if you don't have a passion for the land, and you don't have a passion for growing food, you're going to hate it. I always said people need to be born again if they're going to go to the land. Because you've got to have that inside here to keep you doing what you're doing, and especially if we're facing times to where you're not going to go down to Walmart and get anything unless you give in and you cooperate with what's coming. And I guess I'm just one of those kind of persons that don't like Walmart very well. And so I wanted to learn and put into practice way ahead of time before it comes upon us. And so on this farm, we had a pretty large production level. I had someone ask me, I don't remember whether it was last night or earlier today, maybe it was Friday, when I ran through these first pictures. How in the world do I keep it so clean? There's no herbicides on this farm. There's no commercial pesticides on this farm. And how in the world do you keep it looking like that? Well, I'm going to tell you something. If you don't like work, don't go to the farm. Because the farm has plenty of work for anybody and everybody. From sun up to sundown, I lived right out there. Yeah. Every one of those plants you see represents a lot of food. And everything you see up there was all planted one at a time by my back and my wife's back. And each one of those rows represent about 500 plants. So you had 500 broccoli plants, 500 cauliflower plants, 500 whatever, and whatever, and whatever. And that production in each one of those beds that you see, I would end up with 3 to 4 crops per season in each one of those beds. Now, when we talk about food production, I think one of the biggest concerns people have is how much land do we have to produce what we think we are going to need. I don't know, some of us skinny people, or some of y'all skinny people, I'm not so skinny, but some of you skinnier ones probably don't need near as much or as some of us others, but some of us that's skinny needs a lot of more. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of a toss-up, but if we're going to be homesteading, and I'll be honest with you, I hope and pray the economy never falls. I really do. Because it's going to be rough. I think it's coming, and I planned for years for it to come. And I never dreamed I'd be 69 years old when I started doing this. I really didn't. I just didn't think it'd ever come. Well, here I am, and it's not so easy to do it anymore, but we still are at it on a smaller scale than what we were doing on this farm. You can see over in the corner, there's the high tunnels. There was actually 4 of them. They were high tunnels that were 96 feet long, and some of them were 30 feet wide, and others were 20 feet wide by 96. And we had 4 of them. And in that food production, we were running early spring to late fall in food production. The point I want to make to y'all is on every homestead, I believe every homestead needs a high tunnel. At least one. Because in that high tunnel, as Les and Kathy will be coming down in April, you'll be able to see that you're going to be able to grow food year-round. Fresh produce year-round. It may not be squash, and it may not be a lot of things as the cold weather comes. But you're going to be able to grow food year-round, all your different greens. We're harvesting carrots right now. We're harvesting beets right now. We're harvesting spinach right now. We're harvesting kale right now. We're harvesting a lot of things. We just finished eating broccoli out of our high tunnel. And cauliflower as well. Yeah, Brussels sprouts. Yeah. You're going to have to pray that my voice doesn't go goodbye. I woke up this morning, like I said, and I just about didn't have a voice. So, one of the things about food production is the soil that you're working with. When you go to buy a piece of land, be sure and check out your soil. See what kind of production it has in the sense of, is it a sandy loam? Is it a heavy high clay? Does it have decent organic matter to it? Because when you go to do that, you need to take a shovel with you and turn the land over whether you own it or not. Because you might have rocks within a couple inches right under the ground.
That's us right here.
And when you buy land that's that way, it really makes life miserable to try to grow food. And believe me, I lived in a place years and years ago, and if y'all come back in April, you'll meet Les and Kathy. Les and Kathy and us go back over 40 years. And we lived on a place together, and that soil was the most wretched soil on planet Earth. It was very rocky. in areas, but we poured the organic matter to that soil like you cannot believe. And that soil would grow food like you couldn't believe. But man, when you went out there to hoe it, and you went out there to clean it, oh, you wanted to pull all the hair out you had in your head. Because it was really rough dealing with that gravelly, rocky soil. So make sure when you're looking for land and on your farm, you can pretty much work any soil, really, as long as you put the right components back into it so it'll work for you. But if you're going to be homesteading, you don't want soil to fight with. And if you are, bless your soul, pray all the more. Because it's gonna be tougher. It just is. And that soil there when we started on this farm here, it was a nice sandy loam soil. And it was a pretty decent soil because I'm kind of a nut about soil, and so I wanted to know before I ever bought the soil. I took a shovel on there and I dug. I went all over the place digging spaces. And I got into that ground and turned it up and smelled it, just about tasted it, but I looked at it, I wanted to know what was there. And I told my wife, I said, we're going to buy this place.
Wow.
And I said, this is the place. Didn't have a house on it, I built our own home on it. Didn't have all the infrastructure on it, I built pretty much it. But what sold me on the land was the soil. I was just, like I said, I just have a passion for soil. Because when I see soil, that's what I see.
That's beautiful.
You know, I see it before it ever is there. And some of us have that ability. If you can see beyond certain things. When we started with that field, you cannot believe, if I had pictures of yesteryear versus of today, you wouldn't know it's the same place. The soil was there. But this was a weed patch. It was standing this tall. Literally. I was like, oh, man. But when I got to the soil, through all these weeds, I knew what was there. I had a foundation to work with. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, anyways. When I sold this place, it took a part of my heart. Because the work and energy was put into this place. But I couldn't help it. I profited $200,000 on this farm. You know, and it made me a lot of money. What the farm was making me a living, but it wasn't making that kind of money. But when I sold it, I left part of my heart there. It was difficult because on this farm, I had put organic matter in there that would literally fill this building up probably twice. This sanctuary sitting right here. You would not believe, and that soil got to the point where you could stick your hand down in there like that. And it was just amazing, alive soil. So when you look at soil, you know, you've got to see beyond what's really there. And I had no clue, right in the middle of this field, as you look at this field, after you go down those rows, and there's kind of an open space right there, and it starts again, you can't hardly see it. Right in the middle of this field was a tree about this big around. All right? And you can't have a great big tree out in the middle of your field when you're into food production. So I went out there with a shovel and a Maddox and a chainsaw, and my son and I dug this big old root stump out of the middle of that field. And after we got that cleaned out of the way, I then took my little tractor and I mowed this thing and ran into a fence because we didn't know that there was a fence there because the weeds were way up over here, and got barbed wire all tied up in the bush hog, and but finally got it clean, you know, at least mowed clean. And then I plowed it and turned the dirt really well and got it turned over with 5 billion seeds per square inch, and planted a cover crop in it, a green manure, and let it run that season until I was ready the next season to really get into full production, all right? And got the soil to start to cooperate. But you know what happened that next season? One of those rows, in fact, if you go from the first row up, that's a bed of strawberries. You go down to the next row, that's a full bed of carrots. You see them? They're a little bitty plant in the second row down. If you've never raised carrots, you can't appreciate what I'm about to tell you. We like carrots, and everybody likes carrots, and especially if the soil is right and the nutrients are right, those carrots come out really good. That next season, as we started into the season, and we started irrigating to bring those carrots on, guess what came with the carrots? 5 billion seeds of weeds per square inch. When the broccoli was planted, when the lettuce was planted, when everything was planted in these beds, we had 5 billion seeds per square inch in this field right here. I have another field back behind that tree line there. That was another field I worked. And if you've ever raised carrots, you know that you cannot have 5 billion seeds per square inch to raise carrots, because those weed seeds will outrace your carrot. So what are you going to do? Well, the commercial farmers will go out there with their herbicide.
We'll do it all by hand.
We went out there with a pair of kitchen forks
That's good.
on our knees, 225-foot rows, and we were weeding carrots all day from sun up to sundown. Yeah. That was the first year. That was just the one bed of carrots. Now, we had the broccoli to deal with. I'm only going through this because someone asked me, how in the world do you keep the field so clean? I'm just letting you know, when you want to go homesteading,
On your knees.
you better start thinking whether you really want to go ahead homesteading or not. Because when you're talking about food production, you won't have any food production if the weeds outbeat your food. Your weeds will take the nutrients from your food you're trying to raise, and you will end up with very little produce production. It is a pile of work. Now, I could launch off into another area real easy, because if you let the weeds of sin produce, it will overtake the good.
That's true.
Now, I'm going to tell you something. When I got into these fields of that season that we were in to be into production, I knew I was in for a nightmare. I knew that I was going to be spending long hours in that field right there, keeping those weeds down. Every year of a field kept clean is 5 years of less work ahead of you. You understand what I just said? 1 year of keeping that field clean gives you 5 years of less work. every succeeding year gives you another 5 years. Within 5 years of controlling this field, I could just cruise through the fields. 5 years of keeping these fields looking like that, I could cruise through there without getting on my knee, period. Because when the weeds get up that small, and they're coming out of the ground real little, that's the time of killing, getting rid of them. And there's a hoe, it's called a stirrup hoe. I don't know if y'all heard it. When I grew up as a kid, my grandmother had them. It was called a hula hoe. And it comes down, it has a long handle on it, and it comes down like this. It has a sharp blade down here. Y'all familiar with it? That thing is a lifesaver. I literally wore them out. Because you can move through these fields and just keep it clean, really nice. Now, when it comes down to you raising food for your own use, you're going to need about an acre of land that's kept like this. It doesn't mean everything in that row has to be the exact same thing. In some of my fields, I would have these 200-foot rows split up into 50-foot rows, or 50-foot beds, if you please. And each one of those 50-foot beds, you can't really see it here because I think this year was different, and it was down here because in this field it was actually set out in 32-foot plots. 32-foot plot, 225-foot rows. 32-foot plot, and that whole field was laid out in 32 foot. And within each one of those plots was the brassicas, the potatoes, and on through these plots. And next year, this plot came down to here. Nothing was ever grown year by year in the same space. Within 5 years, those plots, that's one plot you're looking at right there. That plot next year would land up down here. When this plot at the end of the field next year lands up here where this plot is right now. And so it kept walking for 5 years down the field like this. Now you can take this same concept and do it in your own gardens. You don't have to be doing it necessarily on this large of a scale and that amount of one kind of crop. But you have to get it through your head. You can grow a lot of food on a little piece of land. More than you can imagine. With that kind of system put into action, and you not grow in the same spot year after year after year, which keeps, because, I mean, everything that you grow, it's amazing. I mentioned this, I think, the other evening, maybe. God has put an intelligence in each one of those plants. Each one of those plants knows exactly what they need out of that soil as long as the soil is given what it needs so it can pick it up. The next family that you're going to be growing may not need the very same thing that crop that you just had in there. It may pick up something different. But if you put it in a bed system and you're able to grow it, and we're talking about homesteading, folks. We're talking about growing enough food to survive for a period of time. You can take that field and you can literally grow more food than you can imagine, but you have to do it with a method in mind. Now, keeping it clean is really, really key. You know, one of the things I said the other evening, I think it was the other evening, maybe it was this morning, is that you have to organize yourself. You have to put yourself in an organized manner of mind and don't just go randomly out there and think you're going to plant. If you're going to be growing food in a larger scale, you've got to set your mind in an orderly fashion so it becomes easier. To hoe that field right there, believe it or not, it got to the place after I finally got it to where those weeds weren't so taken over, where it was a breeze to work through there. I'd actually take that hula hoe and I would, let's say that row right there where you see the two right in the middle there, I would literally take that hula hoe right down the middle of it, and I would stand like this and just walk backwards and I'd just drag the hoe right down through there. And there was generally not much there to do, but it kept it cultivated and kept any weeds from ever starting. And so it's easy to go down, up, and back, and you're done. Within 20 minutes, you could easily have one row done. The same thing with each one of them. Once you have it organized and you keep it in an orderly fashion. Now just remember, you can take that, depending on how big your garden is that you're using, and organizing it in such a fashion that you can produce, if that was all you had right there as a garden, you could produce more food than you can imagine right there that would last you for the year cycle. Now, we talked about water in our previous discussion. One of the things that I have learned over the years is, trying to preserve water. And on top of preserving water is, what happens when it rains, all of a sudden you've got weeds everywhere. Is that right? Well, most of the season, in your real growing season, you're going to get a rain once a week, so it's going to it's going to force you to be out there no matter what, with a hoe, keeping things clean. When you're growing food, you can't just depend on a rain once a week.
That's right.
When they're small, they've got to have a rain or a water on their feet at least every other day. If you don't, what you're going to do is you're going to retard that plant and your food production drops off. You stunt the growth of that plant. So you've got to have a way to water those plants and keep them in good shape. Now, you can see I don't have a sprinkler system out there. And the reason for that is if you set a sprinkler system up out there and you go like that,
Wasting a lot of water.
hopefully you have a big pond. What you're doing is everywhere that walk path is, your plants are right there, your walk path is right there, you're causing more work for yourself than you can imagine. Because that overall spray system is throwing and wasting water in your walk space.
That's right.
It's a total waste. You're not growing anything there but weeds, and why do you want to stimulate weeds with more rain or more water? You understand? So I went to a system. You can see the line in the rows. Right down the middle of the row is what's called a drip line. It's a water drip line. At the end of that field, there's a main trunk that is run to a system where I get my water from. That line fills up. It has little valves on it. You turn it on, and down the row it goes in these little tubes. It's a drip tape. Every 6 inches in that drip tape is a port. Now those plants are 20 inches apart in that 32-inch bed. The rows are 20 inches apart and 1 foot in the row. in that row, they're spaced 1 foot apart. That's 225 basic plants per row, twice, that's 500 plants. With one drip tape right down the middle that will run 24 inches like this. As you drip it, and it's dripping right down that center line, the roots of those plants will go right to where the moisture is. And you can control it by a timer or just your own self. And once it gets it watered, that watering is right there in your bed and your bed alone, not in your walk space. Now,
how big is your main line?
the main line's 2 inches. It's a 2-inch main line, and those lines are about a 1/2 inch. The drip tape. And they're like a flat tape. They come on a roll of 7,800 running feet. That's a lot of drip tape. And before I go any further with that, the drip tape is the way I irrigated everything on the farm. It saved a lot of water, but it saved me a lot of labor. I don't want to have to be out there hoeing and cleaning the walk path. I want to be doing what needs to be done efficiently in the row where my food is being produced. All right? Now, we talked about livestock and why the importance of livestock on a homestead. I don't know where y'all are coming from, and I don't want to get into your yin-yang and vegetarian, vegan, or meat eaters or whatever. I'm just telling you, when you're on a homestead, you've got to have livestock. For what reason? Either that or you're going to have to buy it. Is that right? Or hope you have a neighbor who has a whole barnyard full of it. You know what I'm saying? Because that material that comes at the other end of the horse is what's going to be put in each one of those beds. You know how it got into those beds? Yeah, that's right. When I started out, it was with a wheelbarrow and a shovel. And I put them right in each one of those beds. Yeah. Talking about work? You betcha. It changed as time went on because I found more efficient kind of tools to be able to help me with all this labor. But when I started, I was actually shoveling this stuff into the bed. I had a little tractor when I left my horsepower, and I had a little tractor, a little Farmall 100. I don't know if you're familiar with international tractors, but it was developed for tobacco growers here in the South. Yeah, the motor sits over here like this, and you sit right here, and you look right straight down over your bed. That tractor was set up in such an amazing way that you could drive right down that row, and those back wheels, on the inside of those wheels, it was actually 36 inches.
Wow.
It would make me a perfect bed. All right? Now, I had a little trailer that went behind it, and that was full of all my manure and compost and material. And I'd pull that tractor up. You could see perfect where the bed would lie. And I'd shovel that stuff in that bed. Shovel it in that bed. And until we got it done down there. And then I would take a rototiller that I had. It's called a BCS tiller. And till it into the ground. If I put amenities like kelp and blah, blah, blah in the soil, then it went on there first, and then I'd rototill it in, and it was ready to plant. All right? And that was the first stage of, putting it in the soil. So that's why livestock on a homestead is a very necessary piece of your life. Now, a lot of us are not into livestock, but one way or the other, you're going to have to realize you're going to have to learn some kind of techniques of being able to create some kind of fertilizer to be able to put in that soil to bring life to your plant. Now, there are other ways and other techniques besides using a composted manure type of material. If you don't have livestock, then you've got to have to learn those techniques, and it's through cover cropping. And the right type of cover cropping that brings bulk material as well as nitrogen type of material into that soil, so that when you turn it in and it's created and it turns into fertilizer without animals. But actually the best way to grow, food is to have both. So it's very important in your soil that you know the condition of your soil before you ever really start sticking yourself into the ground, and growing food. Know your soil. And some of us, unfortunately, have bought land without knowledge of soil. Because we went out there to buy land because we were told to move into the country, and so we moved into the country with our lack of understanding of what was the most important. And the most important, literally, of this subject is how to grow food. Now, to those that have already done this and they've got the hardship of bad soil, the best thing you can do for your garden is find all the organic material you can find and start putting it on that ground. If it's somebody that's a farmer that has old hay that he doesn't want anymore, and he's willing to sell it to you or give it to you, go get it. And take that hay, and in the fall time, put it on that plot of ground and let it rot into the ground. All right? And a lot of guys are doing that, and they will spread the hay all over the place, but before they do that, they will put a cover crop of various different clovers or grasses or winter peas and all kinds of different things that are mixed into the dirt, work it in, and then put this mulch on the top of it. And as they come up through the mulch will be rotting down. By springtime, you're going to plow that cover crop in, however you're going to get it turned in. You're going to turn that cover crop in, and you're going to have a mat of nutrients ready-made for your garden goods. No matter what kind of soil you have, you can use that practice, and it will do miracles to that soil. So, whatever your soil type is, you can work with it the best you can. Now, one of the other things to look at when you're dealing with soil production is how does the land lay? Not just the soil itself, but how does it lay? Why would we want to do that? Now, if you look on that picture, what do you see as the land lays? Forget the plants. Is it flat?
It's on a slope.
Very good. If you really look at the land, you'll see two things. You'll see that the land lays in a crest like this. That's exactly how that land lays. And on top of that, that land lays with a little down the hill this direction. Now, it doesn't always have to be that way, but you want your food to grow in a fashion that it's on a little bit of a slope, so it's not set in a bog. Because in that bog, that food will rot, and a lot of times it won't even grow right. You want soil that has a little bit of a crest to it, or the lay of the land, or at least some sloping to it, to where when you're growing on this ground, when we get the rainy springs, the rain will tend to, and believe me, the more organic matter you put in the soil, the less your runoff's going to be. That's right. It's going to, the organic matter that, oh, you would not believe. I don't know much you've studied about any of this stuff. We could be here forever. But when you get into the soil and the more organic matter, I mean, you all sat in there and ate this evening. How much do you like to eat? Any one of us. Not a one of us in this room that doesn't enjoy eating. Is that right? But you know you have a community in that soil of living creatures that we're either starving to death or we're feeding them. And the more you feed them, the more they work for you. That's exactly right. And the better production you get, because what they're doing is they're breaking things down in the soil in your behalf, so that when you plant plants in that soil, man, those plants go like, yeah, baby, I'm ready to get it on. Because they know that the soil is alive and this community in the soil is working for you to produce food. But if you starve them to death, then they're not going to be able to work very well. In fact, you'll kill your soil. And in America right now, we've got soil that's dead. Dead. Right here in your own state, we came through areas of dead soil. And the only way they can produce anything on there is simply by throwing the chemicals by the dump load on them. If we had to depend upon growing food that way, we would all starve to death. In fact, we are. We're starving to death on food that are empty of nutrients. So the more organic material you put in that soil, the more you're feeding that soil life, nutrients that they can pick on and rot it down. In fact, they're part of the rot down process. They rot this material down and turn it into fertilizer. They turn it into to products that helps you to grow better food. And that's what you want. Broccoli. My goodness, I don't know if y'all are used to growing broccoli or not. Just broccoli alone. Do you know you can grow broccoli, and when the big head comes, you can cut that broccoli head off, and you get what's called broccoli buds. And you'll have broccoli buds that can be that big around. And you can harvest broccoli buds for a month to 6 weeks after you got your main head. But you have to have soil that's alive, that will feed that plant and keep that plant producing food for you. That's what you want. You want food that you can harvest on little land with big production.
Some, some broccoli sprouts better than others.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned hay. Is that the same hay that's, the landscapers use to put a cover?
That's pine straw.
Pine?
I think they use pine straw. Is this thing gone dead?
You changed it.
Yeah, they use pine straw.
That's good. Okay. That field you saw, the first one you saw with the little plants, this is what it looks like after it's grown up into its adult size. Now you can see in that picture up there, I want to go down there, that picture up there, you see the walk path, right? Well, there's that 36-inch bed. It's really not 32, but 36-inch bed. And you go back over to this side, there's another 36-inch bed, that 225-foot run. That's how my fields were all laid out. You can do the same thing in your garden. You look and tell me how much food is there.
Tons.
That's about a half an acre right there you're looking at. You cannot imagine what you can do and how much you can grow for your family in a season. You just have no conception unless you've done it. I started out with a small little garden myself, so when I started into this, and I went into when I left my horse farming back behind me because it was a whole different world, I went to this type of farming and I got the right equipment to do it, and we were producing food, more production on this farm than I was doing on my 70-acre farm.
Wow.
On 5 acres, which I was doing 15 acres of produce with my horses, on 5 acres I was producing about twice the amount of food than I was on my other farm. Yeah. Those beds, that system, like I said, you can take whatever length your garden is. You may want to split it up in that bed into plots, like whatever it is. We did it in 50-foot increments. So these beds, as you can see in this, both of these beds here, that was a bed of kale right there, and that was another type of kale back there, and on beyond that, I think it was a red kale. And those were all kales in that one row. 50-foot increments. That's a lot of kale, but we were doing it because we were commercial. You could do the same thing in your garden and take that one row that's in your garden and take it and split it up into 10-foot sections. And in that 10-foot section, you can grow more kale for your family than it'll blow your mind. Or whatever greens you love. We did the same thing over here. Those were collard greens. And I could go through this all night with you, but this whole field, and right here, this field alone was about 2.5 acres. This pictures you see. It was set all the way across here, just that way. And you cannot believe, you would not believe it unless you walked. I had the University of Tennessee coming out here looking at it. We were the first to bring this to the state of Tennessee. And I'm not bragging, but we were. And the state of Tennessee brought their university students out there that were in the ag department, blowing their minds what they were seeing. The professor asked me, how in the world are you doing this? And he was teaching organic gardening or farming at the university. He said, man, you're putting out more food than I've ever seen put out on a small piece of land. And I'm telling you, I'm just trying to encourage you. I'm not up here bragging about what we were doing. I'm only doing this to encourage you, to let you know what you can do. Even at your age. I'm still doing this. I've just retired from doing this kind of stuff. I've only been out of this 1 year. And I've still got my brain trying to get unscrewed from that. And trying to scale myself down to where I'm not wasting so much food. Because I keep wanting to grow lots of food. So, I could have a commune out there and we could have all the food we'd ever eat. Shh, I didn't say that.
If you don't have livestock, or not around, how can you produce compost fast to be organic? Keeping the scraping, everything,
Yep.
from the house, how do you do it?
Let's look at that just for a minute. I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things that we have been learning over the years now, because I was in such large production level here, I had to buy my compost. It was already produced. I was buying 10 semi-truck loads. Okay, I was buying, and there was 22 to 25 yards. I don't know if you understand what that means. I was buying 10 and sometimes more, but at least 10 semi-truck loads of compost a season. And that was all put down in these fields by my back and hard work until I found a machine to do it for me. No, with me. And because I was in such heavy production, I had to have that in a heavy amount. But when you scale yourself back to, let's say, a half an acre, you can get away with a whole lot less, believe me. I was running almost 5 acres here. This is 4 3/4 acres. I told you there was another plot behind that tree line that was just like this one.
How
Now,
much do you estimate like for an acre? How much will that?
a lot more than you want to talk about. It depends on how sick your soil is, honestly.
You say the sickest.
Yeah. You mean like this carpet right here?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh dear.
Put on the spot.
2-3 inches.
Well, to be honest with you, if I was to start with that kind of stuff, which I will not start with that kind of stuff because I won't buy land that has that kind of sorry soil on it. That's just the honest truth. I'm very picky about that. But if you're in that situation, and we have a little bit of time, I would take 2 seasons and I wouldn't grow one thing on that soil for food production. I would take that season from spring to next spring and I'd be growing cover crops on that of various different kinds, and I would be working it back into the soil. You would do that 3 times in that season. And every time you turn that into the soil, it's building that soil's organic matter. It's, I love to talk about raw food. I used to be a strict raw fooder for a long time, and when I talk about raw food, I see all these living enzymes that are doing radical things in your body. So when I was in alternative medicine, I was deep into raw food, and I was teaching my patients the necessity of eating living food and what it would do. Well, when I got away from my private practice and I went to the land, I looked at the land like I looked at my patients. And I started treating my soil like I would treat a patient. And so I said what was making these people get well was this living matter. So I turned to the cover crops, and I would start taking these cover crops and running these cover crops in a season. And after the soil got to improving itself to where I started trusting it, then I could start working it. But what I did, because I was on such a big scale of what I was doing, I would take 2.5 acres and do that, and I'd farm this acre this year. And then I would take this next year, this plot, and then I would do this next year. And that's what I really was doing and working towards. But if I had sick soil, I would be putting all kinds of goodies into the cover cropping. And you can look under like Johnny's Selected Seeds and other companies that actually manufacture cover crop by like 50-pound bags that you can order. There's other companies that do it as well. And I would be feeding that soil for 2 seasons, and I wouldn't grow food on it. I might have a little garden space to grow food that we want to enjoy during the summer, but my growing plots, I would be doing that cover crop. And when it comes down to that winter time, I would do exactly what I said. Find hay, big rolls of hay or even square bales. I don't care how you get it. Work that ground up after your spring and summer cover crops that you worked in the ground. And you come to the fall season, you cover crop it again, and then you put your hay on top of that crop. And those cover crop seeds will come up through that hay, And that hay will be rotting down through the winter like this, and you'll have this cover crop by springtime when you're ready to start turning it in, and it will be unbelievable. You can turn that in, and you will be blown away what you can do with that soil without ever buying one bit of manure or anything else. Now, they've done this in Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years. They didn't have fertilizer. They didn't have the access of a lot of organic things, but a few animals on the farm.
Suppose we need something now. I mean, what can we do now?
What you can do now, take your soil, whatever it is, and find all the organic matter you can find. I don't know where you're going to find it because I don't know your territory. But find that as much organic matter as you can find and get it into that soil and work it into that soil. Go up to a garden center and ask these people to start ordering chicken litter, composted chicken litter. And they have the means and ways. I have a company up there our way where I buy it by the pallet load. All right, there's 40 bags, there's 50 pounds in a bag. And have them order that chicken litter. You can get it organic or non-organic, and I really, frankly, right this moment, don't care which way you go. I just want you to get yourself into growing food. But get this chicken litter and add that to your soil with that organic matter, and you'll have garden production that'll blow your mind. Yes. That's the simplest and fastest way of getting your soil ready by springtime for you down here.
It's in pellets?
No, it's a granulated material. And the nice thing of it is if you'll follow what I'm saying, even though you may not understand it all, but if you build a garden that's based upon these bed systems, you put the chicken litter and the good organic matter in your bed, not in your walk path. You're not wasting your money and just broadcasting it randomly out there in the field.
So you,
And it's just a waste.
so you created mounds?
No. That field is ready. It's all, as you saw in that first picture, it just worked soil ready to go. And then you just, if you want to, if it's just a garden, take your some stakes and draw you a stream down the line and take your rototiller, put all your stuff right next to that string and rototill it right in next to that string. And then go down and come back right next to it. If you have to do it 2 or 3 times, it'll build you a bed right then and there that's about 36 inches wide at the max. And you'll have that bed ready to plant in, and you can do, believe me, you haven't even seen hardly anything yet. And you may not, but in that one bed, let's say we're dealing with kale, you can have 2 full rows of kale in that bed that'll produce more kale than you can eat. You can dry, you can freeze, you can do all kinds of things with it to prepare it for tomorrow. Onions, garlic, 2 rows. Carrots, 5 rows in that bed. 5 rows of carrots. You can. But you can grow a mountain of food. Unbelievable. Now, write this down. Elliot Coleman has put together a book. He's the guru here in the United States. He is top of the line when it comes down to this type of farming. That's right. He wrote a book on this, and it's called The New Organic Gardener's Guide. Well, he's got all kinds of them.
4 Seasons Garden.
4 Seasons, another one?
All Season or 4 Seasons?
Yeah. New Organic Garden, I believe it's called. I was going to bring mine with me, and I didn't bring it, but anyways.
What was his full name?
Elliot Coleman. Elliot Coleman. And he will give you, I mean, what I'm saying to y'all tonight, you're going to forget probably 70% of it anyways. But you get this book and you start studying it. And it will guide you through everything I'm saying. If you have to go back and refer to it, you'll have the manual at least. But you can grow an amazing amount of food, get all the organic matter you can get, and see if you can't find a place somewhere in this territory where you can, look, if you got some organic gardeners around here, I'm sure you do, go talk to them and say, man, where do you get your stuff? We're wanting to grow a garden, but we don't know where to get stuff. And a lot of these people are good people, and generally they will just open up and talk with you.
Gardeners will share more secrets than anybody.
Yes, yes. And they'll help you and tell you, well, we can get it from so-and-so. And so that would be a benefit as well. Okay, now, before we go on to that picture, this is where we're at now. Now you can see I've got the long big food production field right here. I have a field from there, if you can see it, you go from there over to here, there's a nice big pond.
Wow.
And from that big nice pond over here is another 2-acre plot. And so I can irrigate like that. I wanted my pond in the center so I could work whatever direction I wanted to work. My house, that one we saw, is sitting right here. And I overlook this. This section here is my small garden. You can see the sweet corn, and there was all kinds of different things in that little garden right there. And that's the little high tunnel, and that was actually predominantly my berry patch, my fig patch, and my hazelnut patch, and my orchard patch. That's what that was for. And I happened to have this little piece of land that was left over. I said, well, I'll just raise a kitchen garden out of here. And the rest of my bigger production is done over there in that other plot. So, and again, not to rub it in, but I'm going to rub it in. I was really concerned about the soil when I went to looking for this land. When we went to look at it, before I ever looked for the spring, and even where the house was going to be set, I went to looking for the soil. And when I got into the soil in that plot back there, this one wasn't as good. It's taken me more work to get this really working really good. But that soil back over there, oh mercy. It's a weed patch. But it was where they stored their hay. And over the years, a lot of that hay just rotted and rotted and rotted and rotted. I went back there to plow it, and I just about buried my plow. That soil was already super organic, built up. I just had to add nutrients to it and various different other components. And my goodness, this is the first year I raised a potato crop back there, and I have potatoes that big. Irish potatoes. Onions that were this, beautiful, big. Garlic. That picture you saw hanging up garlic, it came from that plot back there. So it's very important.
You plant your garlic in the fall?
Yes, I got garlic growing right now. It's out of the ground about like that. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to raise garlic in the spring. I don't know what you do down here, but I do know up there, it's better to get your garlic. Onions you can do in the spring, but garlic's got to go in the fall.
Your beds were 36 inches, but what was the
The walk path, 24 inches. Yeah. Because I was in heavy production, I had to have room to be able to get my wheelbarrow down that walk path.
And you didn't have a lot left after that.
No, but I harvested into wheelbarrows, a one-wheelbarrow. And it worked the best for me. A lot of guys use little wagons. I don't like the little wagon. I like the wheelbarrow because I could manage them and move them around a little better. And so I wanted to make sure when it was all grown up and it's full load that I had enough room to walk, because what happens is you get about 15 inches left right here to walk. Because those leaves are just so abundant and they get very prolific. We had cabbage standing this tall. Literally, cabbage with heads like this.
Wow.
And I had to harvest them before they got to that, because they fill up a whole CSA box. So I'd harvest them when they were smaller. And then I finally got to the point where I started ordering ordering seeds that would produce nothing but a small cabbage.
I like the small.
Yeah, and they're usually tighter. So yeah. And so yeah, and the other thing you want to look at is when you look at your soil and where you're growing, is you want to make sure you're not in a flood zone. A lot of people have done that, and next thing you know, you end up in these heavy-duty spring rains. Next thing you know, the creeks rise, and where did your garden go? Your neighbor down the way got all the good soil that you once built. Do not grow in a flood zone. Know your soil, know your land, and like I said, be sure when you're producing your garden plot that you don't have a problem with flooding from the rains that are coming off the hill behind your garden that comes down through your garden and washes everything down your driveway. Yeah, you follow that?
Yeah.
Look at your land, look at what you're doing, because you don't want to go through all this work, folks, and lose it with 1 or 2 rains. Because you know how it lives here and how it acts here. Where I grew up in California, it was desert. The only reason why California is because they have irrigation. Without irrigation, they're sunk. Because they don't have a lot of rain during the growing season. Back here, have mercy. I had to relearn a lot of things about growing food because of the amount of moisture we can get here. So look at your zone, understand whether it's in a flood zone or how it is. Another thing you want to look at is in the process of growing food at a food plot. And I don't know really what it's like around this whole territory, because I really don't know your territory very well, but make sure that you have wind breaks. In a lot of areas where they grow food, when you get these heavy winds and you got food production and it hits that garden, it's going to tear that garden all to... I've had corn literally turned upside down over one night. 1.5 acres of corn that was ready for harvest. And because of my dummy, I didn't have it in a place where it had a decent windbreak, and the wind came down the holler and hit that corn patch, and guess where the corn was? It was in every direction. And you talking about fun to harvest. So you want to make sure that you have, whether you artificially build a windbreak fence for your garden, or whether you have enough windbreak in the direction the wind currents are going to come from, and you know that on your land, is what's there to protect you from a lot of those heavy winds in your garden. All right. Why this thing's died.
Just takes long to break.
Okay, let's go on. Go on. Right there. high tunnel production. You're gonna have Les and Kathy come down here and talk to you about it in April, I believe. We're gonna touch it a little bit. Like I said earlier, I believe every homestead needs to have a high tunnel. You saw that one picture, which is where I was telling you where our berry patch and all that is. And by the way, before I get into this next part, when we look at it, because down here in this area, and I'm assuming you all live down here in this area from Alabama to here, pretty much the same kind of climate, I think, because I think you're in the same zone, if I remember right. You have an amazing growing season down here. It can be hot as all get out down here too. But you have an amazing growing season. You can grow year-round down here. And it's very important that we learn how to do that in growing food all season long. And one of the main ways of doing that is being able to learn high tunnel production. When your garden is done through the summer months, spring and summer, you can grow the garden inside a high tunnel. Every covering of a high tunnel moves you 500 miles south. Where does that put you here?
Mexico.
That's about right. So what you can grow down there on the Mexican border, with a high tunnel, you can all be doing that here. It doesn't take a huge one like you saw in that earlier picture where the berries were. There was a smaller high tunnel, and that's only for my and my wife's, because it's just us now. It's a 40-foot by 20-foot wide high tunnel. That's all it is. And it's big enough to grow anything and everything for a couple that you can't eat it all. Like I said earlier, we're still eating carrots. We've been eating carrots out of this high tunnel for over a month now. We've been eating beets out of the high tunnel, spinach, kale, cauliflower, broccoli, lettuce. We're still eating the baby lettuce and spring lettuce mix. Last Sabbath we cut a big old salad Friday, right out of the high tunnel, went out to the store. It's not called Walmart, it's called Ronart. We went out there and our whole salad was made right out of the high tunnel. Friday, my wife made a stir fry. Everything in that stir fry came out of the garden. It just does something to my head that makes me really weird. I'm already weird enough. But when I see my wife make a meal right out of what we've grown, it thrills me. We had sweet potatoes in there, we had carrots in there, we had onions in there, we had garlic in there, we had bell peppers in there.
What was the dimension on?
40 by 20.
Thank you.
And you want the Gothic style.
How high was it?
Well, it's probably about 10 feet to the crest. Yeah.
She said double this.
Well, you know what? You really don't have to go with the Gothic style down here because you don't have snow. You can go with the Quonset hut. They're cheaper, but they'll do everything you want. The Gothic style was built into production for people that are in a snow or load zone. That's what I have, is all Gothic. But you can go with the Quonset. That's just the one that goes like that. And I'm telling you, when you see the food on your table, on your plate, that came out of that ground, it does something to you. I mean, it really does, and it's thrilling. I mean, we've got potatoes stored under my house that came out of that field, and we're still eating those potatoes. We stored our sweet potatoes that came out of that ground, and we're still eating those. Garlic, all these things that we don't have to go to Walmart to. Well, I won't go to Walmart and get it. My wife might, but we don't have to go to Walmart to get it. What we go to Walmart to get is bananas and oranges. But the nice thing of it is, folks, if the end of the world doesn't come in our time, all the better for us. I want Jesus to come, yes. But I'm going to tell you something. When you get into growing food, you cut your food bill down into half to 3/4 and even more. You look at your expense and tell me where your most expense goes. It's into food.
And mostly it's your produce.
Yeah,
I know
Yeah.
my cart is just full of produce.
that's right. Yeah, you're one of those weirdos. They know what kind of weirdo you are when you come out of that store. Here comes none of them freaks eating all them vegetables.
Sure they do say.
So, high tunnel production, it's amazing. What you see here was on that farm you saw of those plants that you saw planted out, those young ones and then the big ones. Those high tunnels you saw over there in the corner, that's one of them right there.
Wow.
Just one of them.
No, you're not growing these in better
No. That's what I want to talk about. And I want to take a lot of things away from what Les and Kathy's going to come down here and do. But when we transferred, now you can see on this high tunnel, and I think Les will probably cover this stuff, but it's good to repeat it because it'll make it better for you. In that high tunnel, you see that dark up there at the top, and then you see it lighter here. Well, that dark thing up there is called a shade cloth. This was about July, August weather. Now, I'm going to tell you something, brethren. It gets hot. And I know it gets hot down here. So you want to buy with your high tunnel a shade cloth. It knocks out about 15% of the sun heat. You can, but I don't want any more than that. And it makes it tolerable to go in there and work, and it also makes it to where the plants can thrive and continue to grow. Those tomato plants actually went all the way to the ceiling. It was 12, almost 13 feet to the ceiling. Those tomato plants, you see those buckets I'm standing on? Those buckets, I made 2.5 gallon buckets that I screwed my clogs into, my rubber clogs in the top of them, with wood underneath inside, so I could get some height. I was harvesting, and I was pruning my tomato plants here, which is a whole technique in and of itself of growing high tunnel production, of how to do it. I mean, you see how loaded these things are. Those tomatoes were loaded all the way to the ceiling. I had so many tomatoes, I was afraid, every year I was afraid that tunnel would be pulled down.
Can I ask a question? They're pretty good sized tomatoes at the bottom. What about the top?
They were the same size. They were the same size. In my production, you see this wall right here. Against that wall, you see there's strings up that like that too. You see that? Those were bell peppers. Yeah. We had reds, yellows, and oranges. All right? Those bell pepper plants were 6 feet tall.
Where did you put the shade cloth?
I
Is
put
that
it
on
up
the
over
out-
the
It's
top,
on the outside?
on the outside. Yep.
Yeah, you can see the string running down if you look real close.
Yeah, it's tied here and here to hold it down so that it knocks down the superheat. But yet there's enough sunlight in there to do what you need with Otherwise, you're gonna get a real leggy plant and not a good fruit, setting.
Do you have,
Go ahead.
do you have much problem with the bugs inside there? Zero?
Absolutely zero. Now,
Are the tomatoes from grafting?
no.
What's he asked?
You can get into grafting tomatoes, but actually it's not really worth the money. It's a process in and of itself. And it's really not that necessary, frankly. You can get a good, these are beefsteak tomatoes, okay? And there's a whole beefsteak family. And these are the non-determinate. There's a determinate and a non-determinate. And I raised the non-determinates, meaning that they will grow and they will grow and they will grow and they will grow. The determinate, what?
Interdeterminate.
Yeah. Anyways, the ones that will not grow but about 6 feet tall at the max is what we use for staking tomatoes. All right? These kind of tomatoes here is what I recommend for every homestead to grow. Because you can put 2 to 4 or more, if you want, in a high tunnel of that little size that you saw on that picture. I had about 20 plants in that little high tunnel, one row from one end to the next, every 2 feet. That's 40 feet long, so I had 20 plants. And I said, I'm not doing this next year. I said, Chris, knock me in the head, would you?
She'll probably have to.
I said, what in the world am I thinking? I'm having a hard time scaling myself back. I could have planted 10 plants and had more tomatoes to can and to put up than you can get your head wrapped around. That's what I'm saying. In a small space, if you learn the art, you will not believe what you can do. Just in learning, I could spend probably another whole day's lecture on teaching you how to. You take that row and you go over here. There was another row of those tomatoes over here, and you go over one more row. This is a 30-foot high tunnel, wide, 96 feet long. Go over another row like this of tomatoes. Go over, you had a full row of cucumbers. And those cucumbers were trellised up, and there's an art to pruning these things so that you have the parent stalk alone growing like this. And every 16 inches, like the tomatoes, you had cucumbers at the basis of about 3 to 4 cucumbers per setting.
Do you use the same water irrigation system?
The same irrigation system's in here. It's all drip line.
Just for looking at that, it almost looks like there's a boulder running down through there. Is that a raised bed of any kind?
No.
I didn't think that you.
Down the middle, Alan, as you see where I'm standing, that's the walk path. You see the trash that's in the walk path? I'm pruning the tomatoes here. And I'm suckering what you call suckering the tomatoes. Now I'll get there. I know where you're going. Where I'm standing, I just wanted to explain to everybody, I don't let things grow up like a bunch of weed patch, because that's what it looks like. But that's just the trash of me pruning the tomato plants. Then I come back and get that out of there. Now, in this row, Alan, there is a bed there. All right? There's 2 rows of tomatoes in that bed. And these tomatoes are standing there like this. So the tomatoes fall out like this, as you can see. And when you go to harvesting, they're right out here to harvest. You don't have to go around here and all everywhere else. But you put them in that bed like this, 20 inches apart in the bed here and 20 inches apart in the row here.
Do you just throw one stem up, or do you just?
Parent stalk, one stem.
Some people do.
Everything else, what you do is you get less production. You get a smaller tomato, and you get really lesser production, because that sucker is a sucker for a reason. And that's why they call them suckers, because they will sucker from your main stalk of your main fruit production. And when you want to get a nice, big, beautiful tomato, you got to sucker all these things. Now, in this high tunnel, there is absolutely no disease that ever happens in here. I keep these tomatoes pruned. As you can see, it looks like a Christmas tree. And I'm not into Christmas, but it still looks that way. Those tomato plants get pruned, as you can see, all the way up for airflow. And the shade cloth keeps them from ever getting blistered.
What percentage?
What's that?
The percentage of the shade cloth?
15% is the one I used. And I still use, yeah. So anyways, you don't have to have that many tomatoes is what I'm saying. But in a small high tunnel, I will never raise tomatoes outside ever the rest of my life. I'm done with raising tomatoes. Now out in California, you can get away with it because they have a dry climate. Out here, we have super high humidity, and the blight sets in before you know it because of those rains, and then you've lost it. You've just lost it. You won't get it. It'll retard, it'll abort the blossoms, and you're had. Well, you might get a few, but that's all you're going to get. But you put them in there, and your 4 plants, or whatever you want to do, will literally blow your mind what it'll produce. Now, that soil is treated just the exact same way that soil was treated out there in that field. I never treated my soil much different in anything I raised unless it was the carrot bed. Because if you have too much nitrogen in carrot bed, you get hairy carrots. That's the truth. They'll come out looking like a hairy monster. They're full of all these little white hairs, their roots. All right? Cut your nitrogen down, build your organic matter up, and you'll get beautiful carrots. They need some nitrogen, but they don't need what like a tomato needs.
How do you do that? How do you cut it down?
Just don't put it in there. I mean, that's just how you don't do it. You just don't put it in there. But you want to put more if you're going to be raising something to get a higher production level. Now, in that bed, Alan, as I started to go, and I get sidetracked very easy. In that bed has a drip line down each row of tomato. And that's dedicated, and remember folks, you don't want to ever walk in the middle of that bed at any time, period. It is off limits. You do not walk in that tomato bed. That bed is full of life, and that bed is full of roots. And they're sucking nutrients out of that ground. And when you step inside that bed, no matter how tempting you might think you want to do it, you're crushing life to those plants. Stay out. That's what it ought to say every moment you walk in there. Get off me. And stay off me.
How about cucumbers in the house?
Well, as I mentioned, you must have been somewhere else. Over here is another row of tomatoes just like this one. And over here is another row of 2 rows in that bed of cucumbers done the same way, trellised up like that. And let me tell you something, girl, we had cucumbers that would blow your mind. I am not kidding you. We grew the long cucumbers. Yeah, the English long cucumbers are seedless type. And man, people raved over them. Literally. And the bug problem was next to nothing in there. But I would prune those cucumbers just like I was pruning the tomatoes. And I kept all the trash off of them. And like I said, because they were leaning out like this, those cucumbers were leaning back like this, and you can just go in there and just harvest. Now you knew that in your garden. You may take a small high tunnel, and like that one I was showing you on our place now, and you may dedicate it, part of that bed to tomatoes and the other part of it to cucumbers. And then you might use another row for peppers, which is what we do, or for greens, or for carrots, or whatever. And I'm going to tell you something. We grew all summer long, outside and inside. We had cucumbers and tomatoes and bell peppers. In the summer months, inside that high tunnel, we had more of those things than we could eat. And then when it started turning out of the summer, I got 2 of the beds ready right off the bat, while the others were still there, but they were dropping off. And I got some of the other beds, and I got my carrots and my beets and my greens planted and started, and we're eating off of it right now. In February.
Do you use the no-till method?
No. No. Don't believe in it. Never have, never will.
And what did you say?
No-till method in this country is, for what I do, it just doesn't work for what I'm doing and growing food. Because I've got to put material into that soil to make it alive. One of the things I just purchased and just bought when I went down to get my chicken litter fertilizer for various different products is I buy a big bag of organic sea kelp. Organic sea kelp is another one that has all your trace minerals in it. Every last one of them, they've all been washed off the land into the sea. And so people are growing sea kelp as a mineral builder in your soil. So once I put that in there, I've got to get it worked into the soil. This has been a big toss-up between some of us. I don't know what it is exactly like down here for you folks, but I know what it is like up there for us. A lot of people want to use this no-till idea by using a lot of mulch. And I'm going to tell you something. In this country, mulch can be very dangerous. And especially earlier in the season. Now, maybe later in the season, as the rains begin to drop off, you can start mulching a little more heavy. But you mulching too early causes a tremendous amount of mold in that ground, and it can get right up on your plant, and it can kill your plants.
Well, you don't want to mulch anyway to.
That's exactly right.
Rains up.
But my point is most people that are into no-till are running around the clock a mulching type of system. It doesn't work here in the South as well because of that problem. Now you want to, as the summer draws on and your rain may fall back, then you want to start putting the mulch on. You know, your rotten hay or whatever you're going to be using. I don't recommend sawdust, but you know, whatever you're going to mulch with. But do that when the summer comes on.
But not now.
What's that?
Not now. Not.
Well, if you're growing right now, you could, I guess, because you're not getting lots of rain, you're getting some. But I just never really got into mulching because I found myself running into a lot of difficulties. And in some areas, and I again don't know what your area is like, if you're not really careful, some areas create a real problem and a real bed for a lot of critters. And I mean a lot of critters, and they get down there in that mulch and they'll start eating around your plant and kill your plant right at that stalks area. Mice, pill bugs,
And,
all kinds of critters.
voles,
Yes.
and you got,
So I've never been for it, to be honest with you, and it's been kind of a controversy between organic gardeners anyway, and I'm probably on the wrong side of the fence, but that's okay.
let's just, on that controversy, it shouldn't be one, and if you do what you want, and let the other person do what they want.
Well, Alan,
I know human beings aren't like that.
thank you.
Cause I do some OT on myself, and I like it,
Right. Yeah.
but I don't want to either. Very little.
Hmm.
What do you buy with sea salt?
Well, if it's used wisely, it works good. But it works, you know, for various different things that may not work. You know, like Epsom salts. People take Epsom salts and they put it in their tomato, where they're planting a tomato, and it's got a lot of positive, you know, doings for tomatoes.
It does, I read that you waste your time. So I guess the
Yeah.
person does what they want, and if it works.
Well, it's like I said, Alan, you got a million different voices, and I'm just one of those million voices. So
You think it helps?
unfortunately, you all asked me to come down here so you get my voice.
Do you think it helps?
Huh?
Your opinion, does
I've
it-
seen it help. I know it helps. And I'm somewhere caught in between the Puritan mentality and the working mentality. You know what I mean? And I mean, I got ragged big time that we were using plastic. And I said, get off my farm. Because I use black plastic in various different things because I need the extra heat to develop onions that look that big around. And if you want good onions, you've got to do something to get them to do that.
Oh, you said don't tell, is that just by machine or, you know, for tilling?
Well, in a garden situation, it's probably meaning that you plowed it or rototilled it versus not doing that ever. That means you're growing food in a soil that's been mulched and mulched and mulched and mulched until you got a really great body to work with. And it works as long as that mulching is breaking that soil down. But I'm going to tell you something. Try that out on an acre of land. I mean, try it out on 4.5 to 5 acres. It's not even practical. And I've told guys that. You talk about this no mulch system. Great, do it in your garden. But don't come out here and tell me that I'm a sinner because I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. I can't. I mean, where am I going to get the mulch for 5 acres anyway? You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
So, again, how you do it, you build your soul up the way you want it to be through your technique.
Yes.
And then grow.
The art to growing food, brother, is in your soil. Your energy, your life, is put into that soil so that soil can put energy back into you,
Okay, so.
into your food.
Okay, so you, like, you put it around and then you start putting all your matter up,
Yep.
into it, build up.
Yep.
Then you drop the seed.
That's
when it's
right.
time, and then
Basically.
it come up.
Basically, if I directly seed, that's how it's done. If it's not directly seeded, it's done with plants, as you saw in that picture. Yeah, because I have different tools used for different things. And so, but yeah, the idea is in your soil, is putting food, you know, like I said earlier, if you go to the table, you don't want to sit there and look at the food. You want to put the food in you. And so in the same thing with the soil, you put food into the soil and let that soil do its job, and it will do for you what you need. Good food production. And it's an art in and of itself. And what I'm sharing with y'all, and I'm pretty much done, is that what we're talking here is basically to stimulate your mind to move in a direction. Because the art of growing food is a subject in and of itself that we could spend this whole day on, alone. Just on the art of building soil. You know what I mean?
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
If you did your 36-inch bed, let's say it's 225 foot long, you put your amendments on there, your compost and what other amendments, and you take a tiller down it, and you said, well,
Yes.
1 foot down and back.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'll show you real quick, and then we will close up.
Yeah.
If I can get this
The
thing to
down
work.
is on one side and back's on the other, and you got it, right?
Okay, go on. Go on. I think there, oh, right there. In that picture, you see that rototiller up there?
Yeah, that should be SC.
That is not just a rototiller. That's what they call a walk-behind tractor. It's built in Italy. It's called BCS tiller. And it's an expensive piece of equipment, but it will last you. There's no chains, there's no belts, there's no nothing. It's all gear driven. This tractor will do work that will literally, it's a mind blower. Anybody can use it.
A walk behind.
It's a walk behind tractor. It's a rototiller. It has a rototiller on it. And the rototiller on there is actually 32 inches wide. So when I make this bed with all these goodies in it, I take my rototiller, that machine there, and the handles of it, I wished I had it here to show you. The handles actually turn like this, and you walk over here in the walk path.
Oh.
And as you're tilling, that tiller is tilling up the dirt, and you're not walking in it. Stay out of the bed.
So basically,
And so you're walking along like this, and here's your bed. And it's building that bed for you, and it's absolutely clean, and it's just so beautiful and slick. And so when you go to plant, I have another machine I made and built that pokes my holes for me and pushes it right down the row, as you can see in those pictures, and then we plant them in its place. But in a garden setting, everyone can do this if they have the right equipment, and we don't have time to deal with that.
If you go commercial, how do you create your market?
How we created our market, which is a whole other stuff. I'm on first page. I'm going out to Oregon in April. And I'm doing a 10-day workshop just on that subject alone. We created a market through going to the Homeschool Association. We went to the homeschoolers and got involved with the homeschoolers in the sense of talking to them. And the homeschooler mothers wanted good produce. And they talked to their friends, and they talked to their friends. And next thing you know, we had 150 members. Predominantly homeschoolers. I mean, I've slowed down a lot, Alan. I'm not what I used to be, but up to last year, man, I was a ball of fire, and it's been slowing down for the last number of years. So, in this market system, whether you get involved for your own market gardening, when you think of homesteading, my brain goes in a number of places, and this is in closing. It goes into the ideas that I looked at yesteryear. The homesteads were homesteads for a place for people to live. They raised their food. They had their own independence right there on the farm. But they grew, because they had the land, they grew livestock of all different kinds, and they grew food production of various different kinds. And a lot of that, not a lot of it, but a percentage of it was for their own food production storage for what this year was going to be coming into the next year, right? But with that homestead mentality, they weren't looking for the end of the world. They weren't looking for a disaster that was coming right upon us. But let's say the disaster doesn't happen. You've got to think and think out of the box. I'm going to make my homestead to become profitable. As long as we have an economy, why not? Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, most of us, we're getting too old anyways. But to some of the younger people, and you want to make a good living, let me tell you something. I cannot even begin to tell you. 150 members at $30 a box, and that's cheap. It's actually about $45 now for that box. For 24 weeks, once a week, for that period of time, you've calculated up in your head.
But I'm gonna tell you, not very many people are gonna be able to do 150 CSA members. I'm gonna tell you that. I know that for a fact. I believe, Ron, you were talking about art, but not very many people are gonna be able to do that. It's just.
Well, I'm just saying, you do what you want to do. If you've got a homestead and you're going to get into food growing, create yourself a CSA system of 25 members.
It's a pretty good start.
25 members, that's a good start. And I'm going to tell you something. For those that are in this room, and I don't know where y'all are coming from, that farmstead will open up a door that you cannot believe will open up. I've worked with people and brought them into this great Advent faith straight off that farm. New Age people converted to Jesus because of the farm.
They have to start farming in Florida. They call it community garden.
Yes. Yeah. So I just want to encourage y'all, and I guess I should say I'm thankful. I'm thankful for you calling. I mean that. It's got me back out here, which I wasn't real sure. I wanted to put my head out in the public again, but it's got me back out here, and I'm very thankful that the Lord's given me what I've got to be able to share with others. And I just want to encourage you folks. Don't let all this information get up over your head and just drown you. Because there's a lot. I've got a lifetime of this. I started when I was in my 20s. Early 20s. So I've got a lifetime of this. And I can talk this stuff and just keep pouring it out. And I know it becomes very overwhelming to those that are new. But you got to start somewhere. And that's what I want to encourage you to do. Take what land you have, if it's just a backyard, and work up that backyard, forget that grass, and grow a garden. If you have a piece of land, whatever it is, start working with it, and start growing, and get yourself acquainted with growing, and get together with people that know how to grow. This fella back here knows how to grow. He was showing me these persimmons he was growing. I'm going like, you no good for nothing. I love persimmons, man. We can't do them up there like that. And I grew up in California, so when I saw those persimmons, I went like, wow. You all have got a growing season down here that you need to really cherish. So I just want to say, bless you all, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you folks this weekend, and for having me down here. And God bless you, and keep the courage up, and just do the best you can.
Well, how many of you will be praying for Brother Ron? We're going to keep you in our prayers.
Thank you.
And God bless you. God is calling you back into the ministry, obviously. One engagement after another.
Well, I don't know if you're God, but I do know He used you.
We're all being used, so we want to keep him in prayers. Thank you so much for coming here. We were blessed. Carrollton was blessed. And how many of you want Brother Ron to come back? Maybe for another 10-day workshop. Who knows? We'll see how it goes with you in Washington.
Yeah.
But keep us in your prayers.
Yes.
And like he said, just start with a little. The Bible says here a little, there a little.
Amen.
It can be so overwhelming if you try to do irrigation and catching water and planting all at the same time. But do a little, irrigate, do a little bit every single year. And hopefully we can get back with you soon and we'll be master gardeners. Who knows?
Hey, we all gotta start somewhere.
That's right. Now, do you, I have one last quick question. Do you plant your seeds by the moon? Do you follow any of the moon phases? Okay.
No,
So that's.
no, to be honest with you, I don't follow any of those spiritualistic techniques.
So you plant your seeds whenever
I
you.
plant when it's time to plant, and that's just the way it is.
Okay.
When the weather's right, when the season is right, I mean, it makes it so complicated, and I've seen people that are into that, and I've seen them get behind the ball because they're waiting for it to get in the knee,
Oh, okay.
or they're waiting for it to get into the hip. I mean, if you've not ever been or know anything about that system, it's really, I don't even want to talk about it, but no, I don't.
Completely. This was a
Yeah.
question from a friend who had to leave today. We had several families that weren't able to come, but we're glad that we recorded these videos, so we'll share it with them.
Amen.
We had a family who is asking for prayer requests. They were diagnosed with stage 4 cancer
Oh, no.
just in the last week. So please keep that family in prayer. But Jesus is coming soon. We know this. This is a small nail in our ark.
Amen.
And all the invitations for us are to prepare spiritually first. And then the rest, the Lord will help us.
Amen.
And give us the wisdom. So God bless us all. And Brother Ron, just a few keepsakes from Carrollton for your wife. Some
Thank you.
recipes, babies from our tree.
Oh, yay.
Thank you so much.
Love you guys.
Aw. Thank you. God bless.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate all of you. It's been a blessing.
I'm very thankful.
We hope to visit you sometime there.